Hello, and thank you for your interest in LanguageCert, an approved SELT provider for the UK government. My name's Janet Golding, and today I'll be talking to you about how to prepare for your B2 listening, reading, writing and speaking SELT exam. So, first, I'll be giving you information about the exam, then moving on to how you can prepare for it, and then give you some helpful advice on what to expect on exam day. And finally, some other useful information to help you prepare. Okay, right, let's start by looking at some information about your B2 exam. There are two components you need to prepare for. A written component, which consists of listening, reading and writing tasks, and a spoken component, which consists of 4 speaking tasks. You can take these components in any order, on the same day, on different days, but you must take them both within 14 days. This is a UK government requirement. You'll receive your results 5 working days after taking both components. You can book your exam online up to 24 hours before you want to take it. You take both components at a LanguageCert SELT test centre. And in fact, you can choose from locations, dates and times that are best for you. Okay, you take both components online using a computer and headphones. Your speaking component is a short online interview, and this is with a live LanguageCert interlocutor in real time. You are examined individually and you complete the listening tasks in the written component before you move on to your reading and writing tasks. Both components have topics and tasks based on practical experience and everyday situations. Let's look now at both components in some more detail. So, first of all, here is some information about the written component. If you look on the left and at the box with listening information in it, so just to let you know that listening takes 30 minutes and you hear each part twice. If you look on the right-hand side now in the red box with the title listening, we have 4 parts for listening and 26 questions for you to answer. And they can be multiple choice, they can be gap filling. And then if you go back to the box on the left at the bottom, you have some information about reading and writing. These are done in one uninterrupted session, and it takes 2 hours and 10 minutes. And if you look over to the right again in the red boxes, the reading also has 4 parts and 26 questions. And there might be multiple choice, gap filling, multiple matching. For your writing, there are 2 tasks. A formal piece of writing with 100 to 150 words, and then a piece of informal writing where you write between 150 and 200 words. Okay, now let's have a look at the spoken component. If you have a look at the left, at the box on the left, so during the exam, you take part with the interlocutor in 4 different activities. We say the exam is 1-to-1, which means it's one candidate, yourself, and one interlocutor. You're examined on your own, not in pairs, which means you talk on your own with the friendly, welcoming interlocutor, and you can show what you really can do with your English with the interlocutor. This part of your exam takes 13 minutes. Don't forget, it's an online interview, so you're wearing headphones while you're doing this exam. And if you look on the right in the red boxes, there's just a bit of information about the 4 different parts. So in part 1, you give personal information, ideas and opinions. In the second part, you do what we call situational role plays. So you do 2 different role plays with the interlocutor. And in part 3, you do an interactive task with the interlocutor, exchanging information and opinions. And lastly, in part 4, you do a long turn, you speak on your own about a topic. The topic actually is chosen by the interlocutor. Now, let's move on to looking at each part of your 4-skill exam and see how you can prepare. So we're going to look at listening first. You can get ready for listening by looking at the LanguageCert ESOL Listening, Reading, Writing Qualification Handbook. This is on our website, and you'll be able to read about the format of B2, features, can-do listening skills descriptions, the topics, functions, and grammar. Try to get to know the listening exam tasks. So that's why now we're going to look at some examples and some helpful information on how to prepare. Afterwards, when you have time, please see more examples of the listening tasks in our practice papers on our website. Okay, so here is a sample first of listening part 1. In part 1, you'll hear some short conversations twice, and you choose the correct answer to complete each conversation. So you have some examples here, and please note you choose an answer from 3 different options. Okay, let's have a look at part 2 now. So in part 2, you'll hear some conversations twice, and you choose the correct answers for each conversation. Now here you can see 1 typical conversation and the questions for it, but in the exam there will be 3. And as you can see, like before, you choose an answer from 3 different options. In part 3, something different now. You'll hear someone talking, you'll hear the person twice, and you will see a notepad like this. So you complete the information and you give short answers of 1 to 5 words. So that's quite important that you keep to 1 to 5 words for your answers. Okay, now let's have a look at part 4. Here's a sample. You'll hear a conversation and you'll hear it twice. And then you choose the correct answer for the questions. There will be 7 of these to do in the exam. Here you've got 3 examples. And again, note that you have to choose from 3 different options per question. Okay, so let's move on now to some helpful information about preparing for the listening part of the exam. So before exam day, why not try some of these things? Look at the practice papers. As I said before, they are on our website and you can use them to get to know the task types. It's a good idea to try the listening tasks under timed conditions, so get a friend to help you if you need to. And while practicing, it's always a good idea to keep calm, keep positive, and fully focused on what you're doing. Read any instructions very carefully. So, for example, if you are asked to complete gaps with a certain number of words, try to stick to the word limit. Read the questions and answer choices to predict the context before you start on the next thing and understand the listening purpose of the task. And focus on key words in the questions because that will help you remember what to focus on. Remember, the information asked usually follows the same order as the information provided. Okay, now let's look at some more tips, helpful information for you. So during the exam, focus on the gist of what you hear. So that's to say, try to understand the general meaning. Listen out for the speaker's stress or intonation. This might help you find the correct answer. Prepare for the next question. That will make you feel ready for what will follow and make you feel more confident as well. Don't worry about unknown words. Try to guess them from the context. After listening, make sure you've answered all the questions. If you can't decide on the right choice, eliminate the choices which seem to be irrelevant and you hopefully will be left with one. Check once more if you've produced the number of words allowed. Okay, now let's move on to preparing for your reading. Have a look at this slide. So, as with listening, it's very important for you to read the qualification handbook to see the format, the features, and in particular the can-do reading skills descriptions, as well as the topics, functions and grammar of B2. And get to know the tasks. So looking at the samples I'm going to show you here and the helpful information, but then afterwards look at more examples of reading tasks in the practice papers. Okay, let's have a look at an example of reading part 1. So, as you can see here, you will need to read a text and then answer some questions. Okay, now let's have a look at a sample of part 2. Here, you read the text and you use the sentences to complete the text. So you've got your text on the right here, and on the left, some sentences which need to go back into the text. And remember, there is one extra sentence that you will not need, i.e. that's not appropriate. So bear that in mind. Okay, let's now have a look at part 3. Here you are matching texts on the left, and there are 4 of them, by the way, to questions on the right. And for example, here you've got on the right hand side with the questions, which text A, B, C or D is an account of personal experience? And in the second set of questions, which text provides the answers to these questions? So for example, how can you tell when the temperature is appropriate? So which text can you find that answer? Sorry, which text can you find the answer to that question? So you're looking at texts and matching them with the items on the right. And finally, here's a sample of part 4. So you'll have a text like this, and then you'll have a number of questions to answer. Very importantly with this one, you need to use a maximum of 5 words when you answer each question. So think about that carefully and make sure you use a maximum of 5 words each time you answer, and you have 7 questions here. Okay, here is some helpful information for your preparation for this part of the exam. So before exam day, think about the main features of the reading part of the exam and get familiar. So we've started to look by showing you the samples, and then do look in the practice papers as well. Know the different ways that can help you understand a text. So skimming, scanning, predicting and confirming predictions, or maybe guessing helped by the title. All these reading skills will help you read effectively. When you're preparing and you're reading different texts, be aware of linking words and of their role in what you're reading. Okay, and then when you're doing the test, you might want to think about these suggestions. So read the instructions very carefully. Don't rush. There is enough time in the time we allocate, so read carefully and take your time. Start by reading the text once to get the main idea. This will help you locate information if you roughly know where it is. Don't waste your time trying to understand the meaning of any new words in the text. You should be able to understand their meaning through the sentences that come before or after the new words. Try to focus on key words or key ideas. That will help you remember which points are raised and where you can find them. Remember that answers don't always lift words from the text, so look for paraphrases. Remember that information you read usually follows the same order as the information requested in the questions. Try to divide your time equally between the reading and writing tasks and keep an eye on the time. Don't run out of time. In the case of a text with removed sentences, first try to understand the general meaning of the text and only then read the provided options. Okay, and then after reading, always reread the text and confirm your answers. If you still have unanswered questions, do write an answer, even if you're not sure it's the right one. And remember, there can't be more than one correct answer to each of the multiple choice questions. Okay, now let's look at preparing for your B2 writing. As we said before, it's very important to get to know the qualification handbook. So look at the section about writing, the can-do writing skills descriptions, and again, think about and look at the topics listed in the handbook, the functions, the grammar. You need to use a good range of language from the level, so we show you the types of things you will need to use. Get to know the writing tasks. We're looking at samples here and some helpful suggestions for to prepare, but also have a look at the other tasks in the practice papers. Okay, now let's have a look at the 2 writing tasks. Here is a sample of part 1 for your level. You recently visited the sports centre advertised below. Write a review about it for your English school magazine. Mention quality of equipment, the centre's general atmosphere, ease of access. Write between 100 and 150 words, and then there's some information there in the advert. So this is a typical type of question you would be asked in part 1. Okay, now let's have a look at a typical task for part 2. You recently had a surprising experience. Write a letter to your friend explaining why you were surprised and saying how you felt about it afterwards. So that's your instruction, and then write between 150 and 200 words. Okay. So some helpful information for you now. So before exam day, have a think about the different text types that you may need to write. So for example, informal letter or an email perhaps, and be knowledgeable, be ready, be well practiced in their key features. One of the best ways to prepare for the text types is to do the writing tasks in all our different practice papers. Time yourself when you try out the tasks. Maybe get a friend to help you. And produce the number of words we ask you to, even when you're practicing. The more you practice to write within the word count, the better. Okay, and then during the exam, these could be useful suggestions for you. Organise your text into paragraphs, and remember each paragraph consists of at least 2 to 3 sentences. Remember to use a topic sentence, which introduces what will be discussed in the next lines, and supporting sentences, which provide further information. Don't forget that a paragraph usually closes with a concluding sentence, which summarises the information that's been presented already. Use linking words and know their meaning, their use and their position in a sentence, and try to use a variety of these. Don't overuse the same ones though in your text. Use a range of grammar from B2. When you read the topic and the instruction, think of the B2 grammar you can use, in fact. And avoid generic words like good or bad or big. Far better to replace them with more specific ones, like good could be replaced by interesting or amazing or outstanding or maybe terrific. And then after you finish your 2 tasks, try to finish early, in fact, so you've got a chance to check them. And if you remember the kind of mistakes you normally make when you write, you can check to see if you've made similar ones, maybe typical spelling mistakes, or you've missed out the or an indefinite or definite article or something. Useful to just go back through and check for the typical mistakes you make. And while you're checking your text, look for repetitions, if you've forgotten any information, if you've forgotten any words, and make the necessary corrections. There is time to do this in the hours that we allocate for the reading and writing tasks. So use your time carefully throughout to leave time to check your work. Okay, now let's move on to speaking now. Okay, as with the other skills, for speaking, you need to look in a qualification handbook. And in fact, there is one just for speaking on our website. So have a look in there and read about the format, the features, the can-do speaking skills descriptions, the topics, the functions and the grammar. Get to know the tasks. Look at the samples here and the helpful information. And then when you have chance, do look at further examples in our practice papers. The more prepared you are, the better. And the more confident you will be in the exam. Okay, so on that note, let's have a look at some of the samples of the 4 different tasks. So for part 1, which is actually a 3-minute activity, the interlocutor asks you these questions. Can you spell your family name for me, please? And which country are you from? Then they will ask you questions about different topics. In fact, they'll ask you up to 5 questions, one from each of the different topic areas below. In this sample, don't forget, there could be other topics they ask you about. So in this particular sample, or in a particular practice test, we have the area where you live. So they might ask, what do you like or dislike about your area? Then they might have these other topics. So remember, they ask you 1 question from each. So photography, money management, personal comfort, maybe qualifications and examinations, and they choose one question from each for you to answer and give your opinions. Okay, now let's have a look at part 2, which takes 3 minutes, by the way. And I mentioned before, you take part in some role plays. And so the examiner can say, we're going to role play some situations and I want you to start or respond. And in fact, there are 2 different types of situation. So the interlocutor will choose one situation from each box. So you can see here in this box 4 different choices, and so the interlocutor might choose the 4th one. We're friends. I start. Do you want to come camping with me? And then you answer, and the conversation continues for about 2 turns each. And then there is a second type of situation. So the interlocutor will tell you, second situation, and then they'll choose another from a box like this. So for example, they might say the first one, you've seen an advertisement for a job in my shop. You want more information. You start. So then you start this time, and the conversation again continues for about 2 turns each. Don't forget, actually, if there's enough time, the interlocutor might choose another situation. Don't worry about this, but just be ready in case they do this. Okay, now let's have a look at part 3. This is a 3-minute task, and the interlocutor will say, in this part of the test, we're going to have a discussion, all right? Then they will give you some information about what you're going to talk about together. So they might say, the town local authorities are planning to construct a leisure centre and have asked for our views on what should be included in it. Let's talk about what kind of leisure centre we want and make some recommendations. Take 20 seconds to think about what you want to say. They'll give you, or you will see, they'll give you on the screen the task sheet. So if you look at these 2 examples at the bottom on the left, you have the interlocutor's task sheet, and then you will see the one on the right. Just have a look at that. And they will say to you, after 20 seconds thinking time, they will say to you, why don't you start? And then you will start the conversation and they will continue. Okay, then part 4 is like this. So it takes 4 minutes, including follow-up questions. And they will say something like this. You're going to talk about something for 2 minutes. Your topic is, and in fact, the interlocutor chooses one of these topics. Now, every practice paper you look at and in the exam, there'll be different topics. These are just samples. So let's say they choose B. So they would say, your topic is why other people should play your favorite sport. Then they say, the interlocutor says, you now have 30 seconds to write some notes to help you. So your topic is why other people should play your favorite sport. So then you think for 30 seconds and make some notes. And then they say to you, please start. You talk for 2 minutes. And then after that, the interlocutor will ask you some follow-up questions. Okay, so let's have a look at the follow-up questions for this particular sample. So remember, the interlocutor chose why other people should play your favorite sport. So the follow-up questions they ask you could be, what are the basic rules of this sport? Or how dangerous is this sport? Do you prefer to play or watch sports? And so on. And then that will be the end of the test. Okay, so let's now look at some helpful information for preparing for the speaking tasks. So before exam day, it's always helpful to use the practice papers to get to know the topics and the timings. And in particular, while you're preparing for part 4, when you speak on your own, try speaking for a short time to start with initially, and then gradually increase the duration up to the 2 minutes. This will help you be more confident and ready in the exam. And then during the exam, think about these things perhaps. So signpost the direction of your thoughts. So you might use, first of all, then, finally, or other similar words. Ask the interlocutor if you don't really understand what you have to do, or if you didn't hear the question well. If you don't understand something, there's no problem. Just please ask. They'll be happy to help. And avoid short answers. Always expand on what you say and support what you say with arguments and explanations. Make use fully of the given information, the prompts that we say. So for example, in part 3, you have all those different prompts, little pieces of information. So it's a good idea to say as much as you can about all of them. If the interlocutor stops you, if they interrupt you, don't worry, that's fine, absolutely fine. You might have said more than enough. Avoid generic words and try to use more descriptive ones to show your range at this level. And if you can't remember a word, try to say it in another way, paraphrase it. Avoid saying the same word all the time as much as you can, and instead use words with a similar meaning or paraphrase, as we've said already. Try to always speak clearly and organise your thoughts before you answer any questions. So especially in the role plays in part 2 or the discussion in part 3. It's always important to express what you have to say with reasons or evidence or personal experiences. It's up to you, but please back up what you're saying. Try to keep hesitations and pauses to a minimum. You could use what we call fillers to fill in the silent time. So you might use words like well, or now, let me think, or I mean, or you know. But personally, I would say don't overdo it. So use a range of these. Okay, now let's have a look at actually what goes on exam day. Some reminders for you, in fact. And don't forget, when you register for your exam, you will be sent lots of detailed information about the practical side. But let's have a look at these points now. So you need, or you must actually, arrive at the test centre 30 minutes before the start time of your test. You will need to complete some sign-in procedures at the test centre, and the test centre staff will help you with that. If you have any questions, just ask them. Bring the same photo ID or passport that you used to register for your exam. You will need to leave your belongings in a locker because bags, mobile phones and other personal items are not allowed in the exam room. Breaks are not allowed during your exam. And ask the friendly test centre staff if you have any questions, and ask the interlocutor if you have any questions too. Okay, now, finally, let's look at some other useful information to help you prepare. We at LanguageCert have lots of support on our website, and I think we have mentioned the handbook a number of times already, and that is because it's so important for you as a document. So you have two of them, don't forget, the Speaking Qualification Handbook and the Listening, Reading, Writing Qualification Handbook. Everything you need to know about the exam is in there. And we also have a qualification overview you might want to read. Practice papers, again, very helpful. You can work on them with a friend. We also have some frequently asked questions and the answers to those questions about all sorts of things to do with the exam, and other resources as well. And don't forget, if you have any questions, you can ask our customer service team anytime. They are happy to hear from you. Okay, if you have any questions after listening to this session, please do visit us on our website. You can contact us by email at the second address or the first address. We look forward to hearing from you. Thank you for your time today, and I wish you lots of luck for your exam. Goodbye for now.